Welcome, everybody. We're here with Florence Maunders, our winner of the septet and quartet divisions of our Call for Scores, as well as the grand prize. And she also got honorable mention for her duet for tuba and euphonium. And we're happy to have her. So, welcome.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Gosh, what an embarrassing opening. Yes, I didn't mean to win so many prizes. I'm really sorry.
Why don't we just start out with a question? Jose, you had something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. I know that you were very busy. You've had a busy time and you're writing a lot. That looks like a real book in the back. Is that a real book?
But it is a real book. Yeah, yeah. I'm a bit of a jazz fan. Maybe
Ooh,
that's come across in my composition. Yeah.
awesome. Well, I'm sure that'll come up later in the questions, but we're just going to start kind of casually. A typical first kind of question that happens in interviews is tell us about yourself. Maybe like when you started composing or where you're from and so on.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm from England, in case you hadn't guessed. Obviously, that's kind of hard to detect. And gosh, when did I start composing? I suppose I was about 7 or 8 or so, and I wrote this absolutely hideous arrangement of some kind of English folk tune for clarinet and violin, but I had no idea that the clarinet was a transposing instrument. So everything came out with some very sort of Bartokian harmonies. And of course, I thought it was great, but I didn't know why. Just like, this is crazy. Um, and then I suppose as a student, as a teenager, um, I wrote some absolutely stupendously over the top stuff. I mean, I had this really high opinion of my compositions. I wrote a symphony for band using a 12-tone technique and an enormous Rachmaninoff-esque piano sonata and a whole load of shit, basically. Like massive, overblown, grandiose teenager stuff. And then I went to the Royal Northern College of Music, which is in Manchester. I did a 4-year undergraduate in composition and took advantage of the orchestras and bands there and so on to write even more overblown, grandiose shit. Like, well, let's write a cello concerto, but it's got 4 Wagner tubas in it and an offstage brass band. Um, because I could.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, why not? And then I moved to Germany and I started writing some rather more serious chamber music. Wrote my first chamber opera about cleaning ladies, and picked up a couple of small prizes and so on. And then I basically stopped composing altogether for about 12 years or so. I don't know, crisis of confidence, life changes, I don't know. But basically, stopped composing and I spent most of my time, I'm still very involved with music. I was teaching, conducting, producing electronic music, arranging and directing a student jazz ensemble, um, all that stuff. And then was it 2018 or so, I really started composing again. And I realized this is what I wanted to be doing, and I sort of kicked myself up the ass, and it's like, sorry, why have you not been doing all this composing? This is what you actually want to do, and you've been avoiding it and sidestepping and doing all this kind of composing related tasks without actually doing any actual composing. So I started writing stacks and stacks and stacks of music, and much to my surprise, I started winning stacks and stacks and stacks of prizes, and people would be playing my music like all over the world. Like the last year or so. So there's this sudden kind of unexpected, undeserved success. Is like, what's going on? So yeah, that's my musical life story in a 1 5-minute ramble, basically.
Yeah, I wouldn't say undeserved. I mean, when I got most of the submissions, they'd be sent to an email address, and I'd send them to the judges. But I did my own snooping, and when I got your submissions, you sent 4 works, and I was like, oh snap, I got to check these out. Especially because you were the only person that submitted a duet for tuba and euphonium, and Jose and I are actually both euphonium players, so I got really excited by that. Could you talk just a little bit about the inspirations for your works, the composers that you listen to a lot, or just music you listen to a lot, and maybe just a bit about your process? for composition? What do you do
Yeah.
to get that great sound on paper?
Gosh, I think when I sit down to compose a piece, I basically already know how it's going to go. I've done the composing already, kind of in my head. I like to go for lots of long walks and runs. You know, get out into the country. I'm very lucky. I live right on the edge of the countryside, so it's all like hills and woodlands and so on. It's quite nice. So when I sit down to write the music, I generally already know how it's going to go. But really, I've got all those ideas and influences and so on by basically listening to other music. I mean, it happens to me like every couple of weeks, I suppose. I hear a piece of music and I think, fuck, I wish I'd written it myself. So, you know, I've just kind of internalized those sounds. And I think maybe that long break from composition has been a load of kind of musical stuff cooking away inside of me. I mean, all the jazz arranging and educational arranging and so on. I just got very good at turning a project around very quickly. So, you know, it just, when I compose, it all kind of happens, bum, 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 bum. And it's, oh, that's it. I got to the end of the piece. What a surprise. I mean, if you want me to talk about like processes and inspirations for those, I mean, there's 4 pieces there that are all very different. So I don't think there's a kind of overall general thing. I don't know. What do you want to talk about first?
How about those 4 pieces?
Yeah, which one? Which one?
Oh, okay. Let's start small and go big, and just in terms of orchestration, not in terms of the sound of the pieces. Why don't we start with the duet that I mentioned earlier?
Okay, so it's called Within Reasonable Limits, and the whole idea of the piece is about exploring a kind of very limited musical technique and a limited set of notes. So it's basically based on a hexachord set, which is pretty much a whole tone scale, but inverted around a central point. So, but, you know, when the tuba goes down, the euphonium goes up, kind of thing. So it's got that kind of mirroring around a central point, and then it explores that with some canonic stuff, and basically the whole piece is mirrored around the central point as well. So it then undoes what it did at the beginning to come back to the end. So it's kind of deliberately limited in what it's doing. It's being very reasonable, but it's also a little bit tongue in cheek because you know, the title's a reference to some advice I was given, without going into too much personal details. But basically, I was allowed to do what I liked within reasonable limits, which turned out to be completely unreasonable, and very limiting limits. So it's kind of a piece about making lots of stuff out of very little. And part of the fun of it as well is exploring that sort of euphonium and tuba sonority. You know, they do work together ever so well. There needs to be maybe more repertoire for euphonium and tuba, rather than just, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff arranged that was originally for other media, but not just for like those big tuba horn things.
What about the quartet?
The quartet's my favorite piece. I was really glad that it won the prize. I mean, I've got this bit of an ant thing going on. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I heard a bit of an ant thing. When I was listening to the MIDI file of the piece, I definitely got this kind of anxious, little things moving around as the rhythm gets compounded and taken apart over the course of the piece. But is there a story to the piece? Is called, sorry, I referenced it a little bit earlier. The piece is called So Many Fucking Ants. Did I get that right? Yeah.
It's part of a series of kind of ant-related pieces I've been writing. I wrote a piece called Solenopsidisi, which is the kind of classification for what I think you guys call fire ants over there. And I wrote a piece called It Looks Like Ants Again, which was premiered last week. And what was the other piece? Black Ants and Red Ants. I wrote a piece for bass flute. And they're all exploring this kind of musical compression technique, and they're all exploring this idea of big pieces of music being made from lots of small pieces of music. And people are calling this post-minimalist, which sounds a bit kind of overly formal. It's not like that classic kind of Steve Reich, Philip Glass kind of minimalism with repeated cells that are all kind of locked together, and but it is still made from repeated units. Do you know what I mean? I'm not explaining it very clearly, am I?
No, it certainly makes sense to me, and I've heard the work, so it kind of clicks very well. And for anyone who hasn't, I mean, I guess no one's really privy to the MIDI file except for Jose, yourself, and maybe some select individuals. But we'll be playing it soon, putting a recording out there.
Doesn't really do it justice, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's never quite the same as the music you have in your head. But the idea, I mean, taking the whole ant nest metaphor, the idea that the music's kind of made from lots of little bits working together, like an ant nest works together. But when you look at ants and what they're doing, like each individual ant basically does bugger all. I mean, if you watch one ant, you may just walk forwards and backwards for 10 minutes and bumping into other ants. It's just somehow the action of all the ants together gets stuff done, but each individual ant is pretty low achieving. Mm-hmm. But there's this other musical process going there, which is kind of which is something I'm exploring in other pieces at the moment, which I'm quite excited about, in which there's two very different kinds of musical material that alternate. But as they alternate, one gets developed and expanded, and the other one gets crushed, basically. So I'm trying to remember exactly what the ratios of this piece. I think the bit that's crushed starts with, I think, bars which are 13 beats long, and then 11, and then 9, and then 7, and then 5, and then 3. Does that sound familiar? Something like that. And the music originally, when it's 13 beats in each measure, there's loads of space. There's rest, and it's quite open. But when it gets compressed, it just becomes this kind of frantic blasting of notes, doesn't it?
Awesome.
Anyway, enough about the ants. So fucking many of them.
Yeah. Before we go on to talking about the quintet, I was just curious about your history with writing for brass instruments. And you mentioned the cello concerto that had Wagner Tuban and then a whole brass band in the off stage. Was there a lot of brass playing around you when you were growing up, or has it always just been a resource that you've been able to write for? Being I know at the RNCM there's a huge brass department. So
there is, yeah. I mean, I've written for brass band and writing for a big band ensemble and wind ensembles. They're all very brass dominated. I started off as a wind player myself as a clarinetist, so a lot of my formative musical ensembles until you're lucky enough to be one of the 2 or 3 clarinetists in the whole county who get to play orchestral music is all wind groups. And then when I'd passed my grade 8, I was allowed by my parents then to take up saxophone as well. So I played saxophone for a while with NIJO, which is National Youth Jazz Orchestra. So, my early ensemble playing background was all in wind and brass ensembles, basically. And I think when I'm writing orchestra, I know I should let the strings have the main meat of the musical argument, that they're filling up the whole stage. But as a composer, I can't help seeing that the brass are right there in the middle of the page. They always get something good to do.
Awesome. Well, segueing back into the music that you submitted for our organization, let's talk about the quintet and the septet.
Okay, so the quintet, you didn't like the quintet, did you?
I liked it. We got a huge number of quintets, and our
it's
judge
kind of a standard, isn't it? The quintet.
Yeah, it was the only thing that we never got with all the instrumentations, duets, trios, quartets. There's a bit of flexibility with what you wrote for, and we didn't get a single brass quintet that was not for the standard. Yeah, I mean. Yeah. But I found it really interesting, especially bringing up that you talked about the category of post minimalism. There's very much a kind of a scenic way that the music flows in and out of each other, making these large sound gestures instead of your traditional brass quintet that's got trumpet playing the melody, and things go along and develop as normal. Where in your works, especially the quintet and the septet, I hear a lot of just this this undulation and this cohesion of sound between all of the members. I don't know if that's something that you.
I mean, I do tend to think of the brass group maybe in a kind of choral way,
Mhm.
that they are like choral voices and they can blend together. I think there's a bit of a tendency with a lot of arrangers and writers to treat the brass quintet particularly as there's a trumpet playing the tune and a tuba playing the bass line, and everybody else feels the harmony in the middle. You know what I mean? That's not really my approach. Yeah, so the quintet was actually a very, very slow moving piece. There's some very long notes. I think you call them footballs or something. Of course, our footballs here in England are round, but yours are football shaped, aren't they? So it's very, very slow paced, very slow harmonic progression. I mean, it's actually based on 12-note sets. I mean, it's kind of quasi-serial, but using those 12-note sets to create non-functional patterns of triadic harmony, basically. Taking the 12 notes and putting them into 4 chords of 3 triads. So it's mostly all major, minor, and augmented and diminished chords. It's just, it doesn't sound like that because you're not hearing them in a traditional tonal relationship. But it just works very well, that kind of voice of a brass instruments, because when you have the kind of the root and the fifth and the third, they just resonate really nicely together, don't they? You feel you're playing in tune with everybody else. It's very vocal. But you didn't like it anyway.
Well, I guess I know what I'm editing out. The first thing is all these harsh accusations.
No, you probably just like something else better. It's probably something where the tuba gets the tune or something.
I'm trying to remember how those pieces went.
So none of the quintets had a euphonium.
No, and it was not something that I like pushed for in a certain thing. I think it's great to have, 30, I think we had 33 entries of, the standard brass quintet, but all in, such different forms. We have pieces that are, cohesive in the way that they're orchestrated and the sound they produce. Then you have the general things. We've got melodies being thrown all around the 5 players. So it's just interesting to see, what can be done with the 5 tools that are in people's hands on that one. Lastly, we have another winner, another piece that I can prove that we liked was your septet, the Transmission 2.
Yeah. I'm doing some work with a group in New York called the Brass Project, and they're a brass sextet. So 2 trumpets, 2 horns, 2 trombones, and we were going to do some stuff, and it's all a bit postponed, and with this corona. So they're great chaps. They're lovely. And I'm writing a piece for them that they were planning on performing in the fall, but I think it's probably going to be like winter time. And that was a kind of side project for them. I started working on a piece called Transmission, which was kind of a short thing, because they're all in lockdown in their houses in New York, and they wanted to produce, one of those. Have you seen those sort of mosaic videos where on the screen? So I wrote them a short piece. It's about 2.5 minutes long, called Transmission. But there was enough musical material in there to make a much, much longer piece, and so I took it and I extended it. I think Transmission 2 is about, I don't know, 11 minutes of music or something. It's a much more extended piece. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it really takes the transmission idea much, much further. So it's really about 2 things. Well, 3 things maybe. I mean, I do like a flexible title. So the like the transmission in your car with all the different wheels that are different sizes. I mean, I'm not very mechanical, but I've just got the kind of image in my head of all these different wheels turning at different speeds. So it's got that kind of thing going on. There's the part moving at different rates. And I don't know if you've had a go at playing it yet, but syncopations are actually fascinatingly tricky. Because the tuba keeps playing off the beat, but it sounds like it's playing on the beat. That was nice of me, wasn't it? And then it's also got this whole kind of idea of transmission, as in something being passed from one person to another. So you hear the melodic ideas being passed between, well, basically the lower and upper part of the ensemble initially, but then it gets more complex and that as the piece goes on, doesn't it? then there's a bit of a play on words as well, isn't there? Which is the third thing over there. But it's like a transition. You know.
I'm excited to hear the first one, the brass project. I don't know all of the members of the group, but they just recently had a tuba player join them, who's a good friend of mine. So I'm excited to hear that, because I really enjoyed the second version that we got for this.
Well, the first version was kind of like a surprise piece. They said to me, Florrie, we're stuck in lockdown. We can't work on our main project. Have you got any little pieces we could work on separately? And I didn't, but I sat down and wrote this piece one afternoon. It basically is just, I've got this idea. I'm going to write it down and get it out. And so, yeah, hopefully, who knows? Hopefully they record transmission 1 before we hear transmission 2. Otherwise I would have to listen to that over. It'd be like watching, was it the Star Wars movies?
I was just about to make a Star Wars joke anyway. So
we don't know what.
I would like to first express that I can't wait to hear these pieces in live and hear a real recording. As you say, the MIDI doesn't really do it justice, because the way you hear it in your head is totally different, and hearing it live is totally different. But what I would like to ask, what I think would be good to hear, would be could you maybe talk about or describe your experiences being a part of the transgender community, and maybe if you have any words or inspirational words or advice to anybody who could be watching right now to maybe start writing as well, or to achieve anything they would like to achieve.
Oh gosh, yeah. That's a really big topic, isn't it? Yeah, Jose. The trouble with being, maybe it's not a problem, maybe it's not trouble, but the thing I'm very conscious of being transgender and being a composer is that you can't hide. Do you know what I mean? And I'm very aware that for a lot of people who are transgender, that they are, to some extent, they've kept it secret, they're in denial about it, or they have actually transitioned, but they're not openly transgender. They are living as their new gender, and they want to keep their past a secret. But if you're basically known as one of the very few transgender composers in the whole world, then I can't turn up to a concert and go stealth in that regard. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't have that option, which a lot of my, what's the word, colleagues have. I'm not sure colleagues is the right word. People like me. There's nobody like me. So I'm not sure it's difficult necessarily, but it does mean that every time I have a concert or a performance or a premiere or an interview, that this is something which comes up, and it's not something which can be dodged or hidden behind. I had a piece performed back in February which actually attracted a bit of media attention, because it was the first time that a London orchestra had played any music by a transgender composer since the 1960s or something. So there was a number of articles knocking around on the internet and in the press, which attracted some very negative comments, actually. Kind of along the same, I don't want to kind of draw the wrong parallels here, but there were people saying it shouldn't matter if the composer's transgender or not. It should just be about the quality of the music. Let's just talk about the music. And it's kind of like that same line of argument when people are talking about Black Lives Matter and somebody else chips in with All Lives Matter. And it's like, well, yes, but that's not the point we're trying to make. So, when somebody says it doesn't matter that the composer's transgender, we'll say, well, yeah, well, it matters to the composer. There is that kind of parallel. People saying, well, all composers should be equal. Well, yeah, maybe. Don't know. So sorry, I feel I've kind of got off the track of the original question a bit, but this is something I can talk for hours about. Is just this experience that I'm just very, very aware that any time I'm in any kind of public space, is that I am drawing a certain kind of attention, and that people will have opinions about that. And I went to a concert in London just before the lockdown, and they were performing a piece of my music called Bacchanal, a great big orchestral piece, overblown stupidity, but great fun. And I was sat in the audience, keeping my head down, and sort of not drawing attention to myself until the end of the piece. And then I had to hop up and go down the front and take a bow. And everyone's going, "Oh, look, there she is. She's the transgender composer. Look, there she is. Look, there she is." So yeah, there is a bit of that. But what can you do? It's not really a choice, is it? It's a necessity. It's part of who I am. I think it's definitely infected my composition. This idea of taking something and transforming it and changing the way we perceive it and the way we hear it. I mean, and in some of the sort of titles and meanings of some of the pieces I'm writing, it's all hidden in there. So I've got this terrible habit where I just talk for ages and ages and ages. That's because I've been teaching music for like 13 or 14 years now, and I'm very happy when people just sit down and listen to me talk for an hour. That sounds like a good lesson.
Yeah.
Well, you have a lot of great things to say. Earlier, you said that the media attention and the fact that it's being made into a deal, it means a lot to you, but I think it also means a lot to the community that you're from, and people of similar origins or people like you. And so I think that that's kind of what this entire project or initiative is about. It's about the fact that the music exists and it's out there, and there's a lot of communities that don't really see people up there with standard music or music being performed that look like them. So I think that your music is very impactful, and it's influencing a lot of people in all the right ways. And I would just like to say thank you for writing great music and for submitting to our initiative.
Oh, thanks, Jose. He's such a nice boy. You say the kindest things. Yeah, I did actually have a couple of messages after I kind of very excitedly announced winning these prizes. And one of them was from another transgender composer who was just so delighted to see that I'd been successful. And I'd never really thought of it that way, but I suppose to a certain extent, I'm kind of like flying the flag a bit here, aren't I? And maybe making a path for other people to follow. I mean, there have been other transgender composers, but in the kind of contemporary classical music or contemporary concert music world, whatever you want to call it, there's not many of us. I mean, it's still, I mean, what is it now, 2020? It's still very, very dominated by kind of, your typical composer is like, I don't know, a 50-year-old white man, glasses, button-down collar, bald spot in the middle, maybe a bit of a rough beard or something. I don't know. A lot of composers have beards, don't they? It's kind of a composer. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I was talking to my friend Tom the other day, and just for humour, we thought we'd Google image search contemporary composer and have a look at all the pictures that came up, and they all look like that. There's just a whole load of pictures of men with glasses and beards and button-down shirts, just loads of them. It's like what a composer looks like. I think we had to go to the second or third page to find anybody who was black. There were some women on the first page, which was good, but we couldn't find anyone who was trans.
It's funny how that, just the Google search shows that we've kind of gotten to the point where instead of having this rainbow of inclusion and the wonderful availability of all the just different humans who are partaking in music, this amazing thing, we still have kind of resorted to the B-roll footage, and that you can search for composer and find like all these different options of the exact same thing, despite the fact that the best thing about music is that it's everywhere and by everyone, for every reason. Um, leave it,
I mean, if you look at the pop music world, the world of popular music and show music and musicals and so on, there's much greater representation and much more diversity. It's just that our classical acoustic concert music-y kind of serious art music world, which you should be leading the way. I mean, if you look at the visual arts or dance or something, I mean, for ages they've been so socially inclusive and gender inclusive and everything inclusive. I mean, why is contemporary concert music lagging so far behind the other arts when it should be leading the way? Maybe it's a big question, isn't it? I mean, maybe it's to do with our ingrained educational system and our worship of Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Bruckner and all these other dead white German men whose names begin with B. Maybe.
I always want to make sure we always have a discussion about the canon of classical composers. I always want to make sure that when I say it, I always say Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and just once I want to break myself and say like Haydn or something like that, and not say
Bach,
B for once, but
Brahms and Prokofiev.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't say you get 3 B's in a row and you feel like you got them. But
more bees.
Yeah,
and ants.
More ants. That's the real answer. So what's coming up for you? What do you have? What are you writing right now? What are some performances of your work that might be coming up? I guess I don't know when performances are happening in the US.
Yeah, performances aren't really happening. I've had a whole load of online stuff going on recently with various groups. There's a group in Armenia called Ensemble Assonance, played one of my pieces last month. Fantastic German pianist, well, she's half German, half Azerbaijani, I think. One of those central Caucasian states. Fidan Agiava Edler played one of my piano pieces in Berlin. I've got something really, really exciting going on, which I can't talk about. It's top secret, but it's really, really exciting. I know. I'd love to talk about it now, but it's like so totally secret. I'm doing a bit of kind of like preparing for the next step kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Sketching stuff out and planning things. I'm doing some stuff with clarinet and live electronics, so kind of composer as performer stuff, which is really, really interesting, using pitch shifters and loops and so on. So my little solo clarinet turns into a great explosion of colourful sounds. Yeah, just plugging away, doing stuff. You never know what's going to come up next. All the things I had planned, I had so much stuff planned across this kind of spring, summer period, and it's all been cancelled. I was going to go New York. A piece of mine was being played in Carnegie Hall. That was going to be like the most exciting premiere of my life. Of course, that's cancelled. Trip to Amsterdam was cancelled with Black Pencil Ensemble. But I'm hoping all this stuff's going to be rescheduled, like September, October. Who knows? Then there's that collab with the brass project. Yeah, I mean, maybe at some point this composing thing's gonna be able to become like an actual career move. I don't know. I'm still doing a lot of teaching and a lot of playing and a lot of conducting and writing and stuff. You know, I've got 20 different jobs.
Awesome. Well, anything else you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to put out into the world?
Oh gosh, I mean, don't get me started because I could start rambling about all kinds of stuff. I mean, I could talk about tea and how important it is to composers' well-being. Very, very essential. I mean, Americans that don't drink tea, you have no idea how important tea is. You just would never get it. I'm really, really excited. I can't wait to hear your performances of these pieces. And of course, there's this mystery commission as well, which I still don't know anything about. But you know, the grand prize mystery. what's it going to be? What instrumentation? When do you want it for? How long is it going to be? I mean, I've got all these ideas for pieces of music buzzing around my head, and possibly one of them's going to land on this. But maybe at some point you could let it slip. That'd be great.
Once we get it figured out, then we will certainly you'll be the first to know, and then the rest of the world. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that at some point, some great big, one of these fantastic, world famous orchestras, London Symphony Orchestra, or the Berlin Phil, or the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, or whatever, are going to drop me some great big, 50K commission to write them a new symphony or something. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
well, we'll tag them. We'll tag them in the post for this.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, these big orchestras are really struggling because they've had to cancel a whole season, basically. So maybe they've not got the funds right there for commissioning new work. But maybe it'd be nice for them to look ahead. I mean, if you look at the programs of major orchestras around the world, somebody did a survey, and I can't tell you the exact numbers, but it's something like 11% of the music being played by professional orchestras in Europe and the USA was like 11% by living composers, of which 2% was by female composers. So that's not 2% of the overall thing, but it's 2% of the 11%. So if somebody wants to do the mathematics on that, it's a pretty small slice.
Yeah.
So and of those female composers, none of them are me. That's the big problem, isn't it?
I suppose that is certainly the biggest problem. Right now. But yeah, I mean, I think besides for anyone who's curious, they can certainly find your website easily and see just the the fantastic list of works you've already written for orchestra and chamber music and all these things. And we're certainly excited to be able to play a part and put on your works that you submitted for us. So we hope that creates our own little ripple in the world to launch.
It's half a concert of my music, isn't it? I just feel a bit ridiculous, like entering this competition and winning half the prizes. It's like, sorry, I didn't mean to. Like, I haven't given anybody else a chance, really.
Well, we're happy
to get to a party and eating all the cakes yourself.
I know that feeling a little too well, but I like cake. So, well, cool. Well, I guess we'll call it there. Thank you so much, Florence, for taking time out of your day, to chat with us and to trust in our organization and send us some really amazing music. So, Facebook world, social media world, look out for the announcement of the secret commission that she alluded to at some point in time. And yeah, just stay tuned for more awesome happenings of her music, and we'll be doing this with all the other prize winners. So hopefully we'll have a nice little playlist for everyone to sit down on a Saturday and hear Jose and I stumble through sentences with genius people like yourself. So awesome. Well, thank you so
much for being here, lending us your time and using big words that I don't understand. And I look forward to
the real composer thing, isn't it? We start using words like hexachord or combinatorial reality and expect everybody else knows what we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, I just passed my comprehensive history exam, so now I can stop remembering what those things are and go back to just watching TV. University of Texas at Austin, do not listen to this podcast. I'll have to edit that out. But awesome.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, so to speak. And thanks for all the prizes and awards and dollars and playing my music and all this great stuff. I mean, I don't know why you're thanking me. I'm getting all the good stuff out of this. You've got to do all the hard work, and I get all the rewards by the sound of it.
I don't know. I feel like, well, maybe we'll see how hard it is to get all this paperwork filed out. But it should be. Yeah. It's certainly not terribly hard to make to do our part to make the musical world a little better place.
You're going to have to edit the shit out of this interview, aren't you? Because it's about 45 minutes long already.
I mean, I teach, you know, I taught 3 lessons. I've practiced for most of the morning. I think I can go home, have a beer, and pretend I know how to use the computer to do.
I mean, please do slice my long ramblings into something that people might actually want to sit and listen to.
I don't know. Well, certainly in America, listening to anyone with an accent is, you know, rarefied air. But
gosh, probably, yeah, it sounds perfectly normal to me.
Well, we just have to. I have to make sure I have an edit of you talking about the importance of tea. But other than that,
that's the most important bit.
I would like to hear more of that.
For all of our American listeners, can I just tell you something about the importance of tea?
Wow, we've got our clickbait. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool. I guess we'll call it there.
I mean, what's going to happen at the end of this interview is I'm going to go and make another cup of tea, and then I'm going to think about all the stuff that I should have said about these pieces. Just think, oh shit, that was like the really important thing about this piece. It's like the whole point of it. And I talked about hexachords or something when actually it was all about. So you know, that's composer's life. But
well, I'll let you get on with your evening. I keep saying day, but I know that it's much later than it is here.
It's nearly 8 p.m. here. Yeah.
Yeah. So well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Florence. I'll make sure to put up a link right there of with your website and where people can find out more about you and your music. But until we speak again, be well.
Thank you. Love to see you.